So welcome to the ITE International Vice President Election Town Hall. This is Jeff Pagnotti, ITE's Executive Director and CEO, and I have the good fortune of serving as the moderator for today's session. Our agenda for today's 60-minute session is as follows. I'm going to start with a little bit of a welcome and introduction, talk about the changes in our election process, and introduce our two vice presidential candidates. We'll take about 30 minutes and handle some prepared questions that have been developed by the ITE Executive Committee to cover the topics that you see listed on the right side of your screen. And then we'll spend about 20 minutes with questions from the audience. So you have the opportunity as we go to type in questions into the chat pod. We also invited questions from ITE members in advance of today's session, and I have a number of questions that have come in. So I'll use a combination of either the questions I've received in advance or the questions that you might put in the chat pod. So anytime a question hits you, feel free to type it in, but we won't address it until the second half of the session. And then I have a final question for both of our candidates that we'll close with as we get close to the top of the hour. So I want to start by just reminding you of the changes that you made through approval of the 2017 constitutional amendments. And they fall into four different categories. First, we have a shorter campaign period. Our campaign period really started about the 1st of December and will run through the end of the election period, which is March 15th. We went to a virtual campaign style. So in previous years, our candidates would travel around to ITE district meetings and make presentations at those district meetings. We've now brought that into a virtual campaigning approach. So we have the town hall we're on today. We have a Facebook Live event that will take place at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. We also have a lot of candidate information that's available on the ITE website. And the reason that we moved to a virtual campaigning period was to reduce the demands on the candidates and to attract a broader pool of candidates that were interested in being part of the process of running for ITE Vice President and ultimately ITE President. We also have an earlier election process then. So our election process runs from February 15th through March 15th. The same length as we've always had, a month of voting period, but we've moved it in the February to March timeframe, where previously it was more in the July-August timeframe. What that allows us to do then is have a vice president-elect identified by late March. And the benefit is that vice president-elect then has the ability to engage at the district meetings and with the ITE board of directors more in a listening and engagement mode and less in being in a selling mode. They no longer are campaigning. They know that they have been elected, and their presence will allow them to engage with ITE members and to engage with ITE leadership in both providing their thoughts on the direction of the organization and preparing for the responsibility of ultimately being the vice president and president of the organization. So all in all, I think a series of good changes, but one that we're still adapting to a little bit as we move into this virtual campaigning and election process. So now I'm pleased to introduce our two candidates. First, Jason Crawford, and Jason is Head of Research and Implementation Division at Texas A&M, the Texas Transportation Institute in Arlington, Texas. Jason is a 27-year employee of TTI. He has held elected offices with the Greater Fort Worth section, the Texas District, and served on the ITE Board of Directors from 2015 to 2017, and is a Leadership ITE graduate. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
And Randi McCord. Randi is a principal with DKS Associates in Portland, Oregon. He has 35 years of professional experience, and he has held elected IT offices in the San Francisco Bay section, the Oregon section, the Western District, and served on the ITE Board of Direction from 2007 through 2009, and also served as chair of the ITE Parking Council. Welcome, Randi.
Thanks, Jeff.
So now I want to go ahead and move into the questions and the discussion, and we'll alternate back and forth in terms of who answers first and who answers second in answering our questions. So with our opening question, it's going to be on vision for ITE, and Jason, you'll go first. So the question for both of you is, what's your vision for ITE? And I might ask it in this way, where would you like to see the organization be 5 years from now after you're finishing your ITE presidency and maybe looking back a little bit? What would you hope that ITE looks like as a result of your leadership? So Jason, I'll have you start.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to everyone online now and also who will be listening to this recorded podcast later. My vision for ITE is that we will be a strong global community of transportation professionals that is the association of choice for leading our profession. And with that, I would also see that we could grow our membership to 17,000. We just reached 15,000 this year, but with continued pushes and engagement, I believe that we can reach 17,000. In doing that, that's also reaching out to student chapters and expanding those from traditional civil engineering departments to planning departments, electrical engineering departments, and other multidisciplinary departments to engage our next generation of ITE members. Also, I would see that ITE would expand its leadership development pipeline, where currently we have student leadership summits and leadership ITE. In my campaign, I'm proposing to develop a leadership session that could be half day or full day, but delivered locally at districts and sections. And finally, I would see that leadership in ITE would be more diverse in our leadership ranks. And that's another theme that I have in my lead campaign.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks very much. Randi, same question for you. What's your vision of ITE over the next 5 years or so?
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks to all the members, wherever you may be out in the ITE membership. The core of ITE is a service organization, professional members, and the core vision for ITE needs to be about its members, member advocacy, the member experience, and everything about our members. And so in 5 years, what I would like to see is an organization that at 15,000 that not only is growing, but is growing the individuals at a pace for their career development at a level that we've not maybe seen in the past. We have technology and other applications available to us that we can reach out to a much greater level of people than just the boards or the councils and the officers that we have, that we may be able to dip into a much greater level of engagement with our membership. I would expect that we would be using social media at a much higher level and every means of communication, whether it be face-to-face or through email and other means, to make sure that people have access to the information that ITE has. ITE's real core at the beginning and the end of the organization is about expertise in transportation and career enhancement and networking. And those are areas that are our cores that we've built a strong brand over. And I would hope after 5 years, not only would we have that opportunity to network, but we'll have networked in Portland, Oregon at the 2021 annual meeting, international joint meeting with the Western District.
Thank you very much, Randi. So our next question is going to be on leadership, and what I want to do is explore leadership style. So I'll ask the question this way, and Randi, you'll answer first. If I interviewed one of your employees or perhaps someone that has worked with you as a volunteer and asked them to describe your leadership style to me, how would they describe it?
Well, probably out of the gate, they'd probably say there's a lot of energy. And I would think that that might be the first thing that distinguishes my leadership style from many others. I'm very passionate about the industry, have been that way from the very outset, and believe we can make a difference in everything that we do. And I bring that to the people that I work with. I think the second is it's hard for a lot of times when you're that energetic to listen, but I do listen very carefully to all the needs of our employees, particularly members, to find out what are their needs and how can we best express those. But I think most importantly, establishing guiding principles for people when you lead them is extremely important, and being clear about those guiding principles and making sure that you don't set outcomes, for example, numbers and things that are outcomes as your guiding principles. What you should be doing is setting goals that are very meaningful, that everybody can agree to, because generally we never disagree at that level, where we usually have disagreements in the details. So setting things out like member experience as the principal objective of ITE relationships is extremely key, because then everything pivots off of that, from our partnerships to the leadership that we bring to the networking, the technical expertise, and the things that we bring to the table. I think our employees that I've worked with in the past have been energized, and I find that passion plays a key role in leadership.
Thank you very much, Randy. Jason, how would your employees or volunteers that have worked with you, how would they describe your leadership style?
Yeah, thanks. I think they would first say that I'm a listener, and that's really what I do in meetings. I try to absorb and listen to what people are saying, to understand the perspectives that they're bringing into the conversation, and to really weigh those. I also, for groups that I've worked with in ITE and at TTI, most important thing is to have a clear charge for what you're trying to seek, the objective you're trying to obtain. And so with that, I would work to make sure that we have clear charges. I also encourage participation from everyone in the group to make sure that all their voices are heard, to make those that are very vocal, give them a chance to dampen a little bit, and those that are quieter a chance to speak and have their opinions and voices heard. And then finally, again, with listening, I seek out kind of the opposing view, the devil's advocate view, the challenging view to what we're talking about, to make sure that we haven't missed something clearly that would be important for us to evaluate or to consider as we're moving forward and working on a project or towards an objective or task.
Thank you. Now let me shift our conversation to governance. A key part of IT success is strengthening the connection between the international parts of our organization, the headquarters parts of our organization, the president, the board, and the staff, and the grassroots of the organization, the district, the section, and the chapter level. How can we create a stronger One ITE approach while keeping the local flavor alive? Jason, you're first.
Okay. It's very important that we keep the local flavor of our chapters, our sections, and our district meetings. That's really kind of the essence that locally you as a member identify with. But we do need to make sure that from headquarters through all of our levels to chapters, that we are pushing forward in the same common direction, which is an element of my campaign with alignment. And with that, we are starting a step now with ITE strategic plan for a One ITE experience. But really how that translates, we've got to work hard. And I will say in the last 2 years, at least for elected leaders at the sections, the districts, and the chapter levels, Jeff, the communication that you've had through your quarterly talks on leadership helps to inform those leaders what's happening at headquarters. And that was a great first step to really keeping those elected leaders and those that communicate information to local members apprised of to what is happening at ITE headquarters, our initiatives, and our successes.
Thank you, Jason. Randy, your thoughts on creating more of a One ITE approach and not losing that grassroots part that's so important?
It's a great question, and I think one of the number one things out of the gate is to ask our members, and particularly our leaders, what they find, what they're experiencing. And when I've spoken to many of our section presidents within the organization, you find a lot of their efforts are towards administrative activities rather than some of the global initiatives that we see established. And so finding out from them directly how we can best interchange and work in using common jargon. For example, we have several committees and councils, board activities that many of the local chapters and sections really have no idea how they all fit. And being able to interconnect those together so people have a better, again, this gets back to that guiding principle, being able to set up a governance structure that people can understand, not only from the structure of committees, but our technical products. When somebody has a great idea, how does that flow within ITE to something like a handbook or the trip generation manual? Being very clear about how the leadership experience is enhanced, and I think connecting with the membership on a routine basis is very critical to share what's going on in IT. For example, the RRFB right now, huge issue for many of our members day to day, and being able to be connected And what you've been able to do with ITE community has been awesome. And those are the kinds of things that help take us on a new trajectory for ITE going forward.
Thank you, Randy. I want to talk about member experience and come at it this way. So, Randy, you're first. I would like you to describe an ITE moment, an experience that you had as an ITE member that stuck with you and made you want to be more involved in ITE and part of this organization. So can you relate an experience that you had, which you term an ITE moment?
Holy cow, there's a lot more than one, to say the least.
Sure.
You know, I'll use an example because I'm very passionate about our technical products as an organization. And an example arose, and I think it's one that a lot of people experience in ITE, when parking generation had sat fallow for about 20 years. And I just asked the question, you know, what are we doing with that? And it was simply just asking a question at a meeting with some folks, and people didn't have the answer. And they said, well, let's go find somebody that does, which is the networking piece right there in terms of a membership experience of finding out more. As I found out more, there was a lot to be done, to be honest, to bring that forward. And so it was one of these moments where you had a chance within the ITE experience to make a difference within the organization and be able to provide meaningful information that members would use for years to come, and a process by which they could utilize that probably for generations. And so to me, that was exciting. It was an exciting thing, and we have that going on every day within the organization. Particularly today, with technology evolving at such a great pace, there's tremendous opportunities. And our membership is changing dramatically. I mean, from when I started to today, we're seeing a great evolution, or transition of our membership. It's growing, and the industry is growing. We have great opportunities to create a great experience for our members.
Thank you, Randy. Jason, an ITE moment for you?
Sure. Well, my ITE moment is actually probably the spark that set me on this journey of service to ITE, and it was when I was coming out of graduate school and entering the profession, and I knew I wanted to do something with ITE, and I had written the then Texas District President, Robert Jenkins, and said, hey, I'm young, I want to do something. And he assigned me to the Public Relations Committee at TechSite. And there, going to my first committee meeting, kind of getting my feet wet, if you want to talk about jumping in the deep end, being the young person at the table, I really found that was where I really got that sense of family and community that ITE is really known for, but also the things that challenged me to volunteer for, things to do. But then around the table, I found, and I still see this today, mentoring and encouragement for those that are willing to come in and volunteer and be part of something. So what I see in that ITE moment is, again, kind of that family, the networking, the mentoring, the encouragement, and I see that continuing in ITE. And really, that's what sets us apart, I think, from other associations with that informal feel.
Thank you. Our next topic is under the heading of diversity and inclusion. ITE went through a constitutional change process in 2017. Part of it was related to the election, as I talked about earlier, but part of it was really more formally embracing the vision of a community of transportation professionals. How do you think we should proceed with advancing toward this vision? Jason, I think you're first.
Okay. Yes, I'm supportive of us becoming that global community of transportation professionals. I believe that with our problems that we're dealing with today, it's very multidisciplinary. As I sat around the international board table starting in 2015, we talked about this issue. We talked about ITE becoming the place for the intellectual discussion, discourse, and dialogue for the issues that our profession is faced today. And we are a community of engineers and planners, but we can also be a community with entrepreneurs, with technologists, with law enforcement, with public health professionals, all things that are influencing the transportation system today. What I would like to see is that our tent, ITE tent, becomes that place where our four issues that we're dealing with now at the international level, AVCV, Transportation and Public Health, Smart Communities, and Vision Zero, all of those are brought together, and they are so multidisciplinary that we need to be accepting of these other professionals dealing in transportation and affecting change in the transportation system.
Thank you. Randi, your thoughts about how we proceed toward the vision of a broader community of transportation professionals?
Yeah, that is a challenging question because it brings in a diversity of opinion, thought leadership, and expertise that for the future of our industry that we have to engage and dive in with. The industry of the past, of the last 40 and 50 years, is going to be very difficult to stay in our silo. One of the things I believe really strongly in and have documented well on my website is this issue of partnerships. We've got 40 organizations that use transportation as a principal aspect of their organization. And if we are going to grow and become that community, we're going to need to find ways to break those silos down and work together as teams and partners with organizations and not let financial issues get in the way of building a great transportation community. There's strength in numbers, and not to steal from the Warriors slogan, but the reality is when we get together in joint meetings, we have great opportunities as a community to learn more, engage more, and build expertise, which are the core tenets of ITE. I think when you look at the issue, though, it brings a lot of issues with it. And for example, when we have diversity of opinion, we need to be ready to deal with, thought process that wasn't maybe the same. And the dignity and respect of our professionals is key. And along the way, we never should sacrifice that as we're going through. We can have and engage in difference of opinion, and we need to be able to retain that as we go. And I would say on the global aspect, we've got some barriers there to overcome too as a community. And at this point, I would say that if we're going to deal with that, language is one of those. And while I don't speak a lot of other languages, I will say a good friend of mine from Los Angeles was a former president who uses this slogan all the time, Juntos somos mejores, which would be together we're the best.
Thank you, Randi. You talked a little bit about, you both have, about the global, and that's really where our next question goes, is around the idea of global reach. IT is striving to expand its global footprint, and we'd be interested in your thoughts on how we can do a better job of enhancing our international presence and meeting the needs of our members outside of North America. So, Randi, I think you're first.
Well, I think a starting point there where guiding principles is key. There's a long legacy at ITE where we've looked at global influence over time, but really never acted in a capacity to overcome some of those issues, like I mentioned earlier, about language and the barriers that exist, whether by metric system or even the paper that we use in terms of our publications. And so when we're looking at global access, this idea of starting at a partnership level, and I think one of the things, and I would compliment you, Jeff, and the work that you've done to establish the MOUs for Korea and Greece both are great stepping stones, and they provide those avenues where we can take incremental progress towards these goals and learn along the way. Global outreach isn't just going to happen overnight, and it does take a lot of energy. And with 15,000 members and more to come, we've got people that are passionate about this, and we can go find those people that can help us in places like Puerto Rico and Mexico, in Europe, and other places that we have not explored as greatly in Asia. And there are opportunities with partners that we can build with as we go forward. I think one of the things we need to always think about when we think global is go back to the core of what we're good at. What we're good at are strong technical products, information that we share, and being able to access and provide networking opportunities for people. And by that, we can learn a lot from the folks globally as well as we can share with them as we go forward.
Thank you. Jason, your thoughts on how we expand our global footprint?
Yeah. Well, I also agree. I think that the way that ITE has been moving in the last couple of years with the memorandums of understanding with the Chartered Institute of Highways and Transportation, the Hellenic Institute of Transportation Engineers, and then the Korean Transportation Society are good first steps in terms of us getting exposure and working with common goals with associations across the world. And I'm sure that we have more associations to develop those connections with. But I would also say that we have to look at things with our products. What is easy for us to do with publications for dual units, if you're talking about publications, hard copies, the different page sizes, overcoming those between U.S. standards and other global standards. But one aspect I see to re-energize or to really engage is our former student chapter members who have come to school in North America and have gone back to their home countries, who had an experience with ITE and know about ITE. I think they're the best catalyst that we haven't yet tapped to try to engage them and get them to coalesce, come together, and create ITE sections abroad.
Thank you very much. I have one last question before we begin to look at questions from our audience. So those of you online, if you want to type in a question, feel free to do so. Again, I have some questions that people have sent in advance that I will use. Our last question is an open mic question. So really, it's an opportunity for each of you to talk about an area that you're passionate about or something that you'd like to share with our members that maybe we haven't covered in the questions we've asked to date. So Jason, you go first. You're free to kind of just take a little bit and talk about things that we haven't touched on.
Okay. Well, what I would encourage all of our members to do with this change in campaign process is to research your candidates online that's available through the ITE website, but also the social media that was printed. Go see your candidates. You know, it's hard with virtual campaigning to try to reach everyone. One aspect that I've tried to do in the social media campaigning is producing a series of Tuesday talks that have been available on Facebook Live and Periscope that talk about each one of the 4 themes in my campaign: leadership, engagement, alignment, and diversity. And I delve into the specifics of elements within that. So please do research the candidates and find the message that resonates most with you as you consider the future for ITE. And it would be an honor for me to serve ITE and in this capacity as Vice President-elect, and would be honored for your vote.
Thank you, Jason. Randi, your opportunity to pick something that you'd like to share with folks.
Well, there can never be just one. There's definitely more than one. And I would encourage you, just as Jason mentioned, to go to the website, and the key themes that I've established in terms of member experience, partnerships, and leadership are well outlined there. But I want to pull 2 areas out specifically that are exciting areas that progress can be made in this tenure as Vice President, President, past President at ITE. First is in terms of diversity. Michael Sanderson has taken on an initiative as the president, and there is clear ground and clear history there of where we can make progress. When I got out of school, you could count the percentage of women on one hand. We're up at a quarter now, moving to a third, and things are moving in an accelerated direction now. And we've got really great opportunities now to change the membership and transform it. And that's happening whether we're there or not. And so with leadership, we can expand that opportunity within this organization. And I look forward to seeing the day where we're closer to the 50%, possibly in the very near future. Secondly, probably the biggest gift I want to make sure that I provide as an officer of ITE International is a before and after clearinghouse of information. So often in our industry, we have tons of information, of technical information, whether it's speed humps or autonomous vehicles or changeable message signs, interchange performance, wrong way driving, where information is available but not readily available. We can change that, and we can make that transformative and use the tools that we have from websites and social media to provide our members access to that information readily.
Thank you both. So now we're going to shift to questions from the members at large. I've got one that's come in the chat pod. I have some others. So I'm going to start with this one. Currently within ITE, there seems to exist a widening gap between the progressive and the old school camps regarding the movement of the industry from traditional vehicle-driven priorities to a more multimodal approach. The question is, how does each candidate plan to address the issue to move the Institute forward on a united front? So Randi, I think you're up for the first answer to that.
Well, I think right out of the gate, it's important for us to understand when we say multimodal, that means all modes, and that includes vehicles. For some people, that involves pedestrians, trucks, bicycles, transit, and other modes. But when we look at all those modes, all the views are very valid too. And while we may disagree with some people's perspectives, and some of those may be viewed as old, the dignity and respect that we can provide our membership as we have this discourse should be always held first and foremost. I think at this point going forward, to think that we are not going forward in a multimodal future that involves technology would not be good for this organization. It would not be good for the career advancement of our members. And so putting our members in a position where they can transform and learn and be able to utilize the new tools and new approaches that are in place and find ways to collaborate as partners together with organizations so that we don't go back, we don't retrench back to these silos of the past. We find a way as an organization, ITE, to be that big tent, to be that place where everyone can come together and not be afraid and not have barriers in the way of having an opinion that may be auto-centric or it may be pedestrian-centric. We should embrace them all and find ways, and we're engineers, planners, we deal with quantification all the time. We can prioritize together, and by no means does it mean we're going to do it unanimously with 100-0 vote. We're going to do it in a way that we listen and find the best solutions for people and their careers.
Thank you, Randy. Jason, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess we have this widening gap of progressive and traditional, and what I would say is we're at a point where we have technology changing. Our transportation system will be changing with the advent of increased technology coming into the market. But as Randy said, we do need to be multimodal. We need to be cognizant of pedestrians and bicyclists, transit users, the autos, freight. All of those are very important components to our transportation system. We do need to balance them. There is some more urban versus rural standpoint in that as well. And we have to remember that as an association, we are not just urban or we're not just rural, but we do cover both. And so we do need to find that balance. But again, with technology changing, I think our profession is facing something over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years that we don't really know what's going to happen, but we know that it will be impacting us. And ITE needs to be at the forefront of that change to help our members get the information and the technology that they need to do their jobs.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask a question that just came in that I think is kind of a follow-up or links to the previous question, which is, how would you address the loss of ITE members to other professional organizations or transportation professionals choosing other organizations? Jason, your thoughts on that?
Yes. Well, I think for those members that have gone to other organizations or are choosing to go to a sister competing organization, I think it's important that they get exposed to what ITE is now. And I would say ITE in the last 2 years is probably different feeling and energy level than we were 5 years ago. And I would encourage people to talk about ITE membership experience to their peers back in your local area. Invite them to meetings. Get those prospective members to see what we're talking about at ITE, to get a feeling of the energy that we have at our meetings and where we're going in the future. The future is very bright. It's very exciting about the things that are changing and how ITE is working to be at the very leading edge of that through both out-front leadership, but also partnerships and collaborations with other associations that we have common goals and interests with.
Thank you. Randy?
Yeah, this is a very intriguing question, and one that I think right out of the gate, you asked, how would you deal with this? I think the very first thing I'd do is go talk to some of these members and find out their experience and what they had found were the reasons for the change. And they're probably very valid reasons, but there's good lessons to be learned there that we can build from. I think that no member of an organization or leader organization can't ask that question themselves a lot of times. Maybe I should be in another group. Maybe somebody else, there's something better out there. But at the end of the day, this is why you don't set goals and parameters as outcomes. You set vision of the member experience being outstanding, being an advocate for the members, making sure that the member experience delivers what they want in terms of networking and in terms of technical products that help them in their day-to-day experience. I believe if we do that, the loss of members, we'll probably always have some members that we'll lose, but I think we'll have a tremendous reversal towards the flow of members coming to the organization. And I think if we listen along the way, we can take a lot of those issues that arise, and I've seen with some of our members, particularly leaders that have had to deal with issues like becoming ERISA and IRS experts in 501c3s and having to deal with insurance. These are not issues that our section leaders should be dealing with because it transforms their perspective of the organization. We as an organization can lead and provide resources to our leaders to allow them to jump into these innovative and expose them to the new technical areas that are coming in terms of technology and innovation, and let them have that experience as their leadership evolves.
Thank you. You mentioned leadership, and that's where we're going to go back to is leadership. And so one question we got is, what's your favorite leadership book or podcast and why? So, Randy, I'll ask you.
Oh, my gosh. I've only read like about 40 or 100 of those in the last 5 years. When I became president of DKS, that was one of the things that I did a lot of in reading. You know, one of the authors I like is probably not really well known, but Patrick Lencioni. He writes stories about people in organizations, and one of them is the 5 dysfunctions of an organization. He goes through storytelling as to how that goes, and it gives you perspectives, and I think it's a really useful tool to understand different perspectives that people have as they make decisions and how they lead people going through. You know, one of the things I think we have a great opportunity as leaders of ITE, and we've created a great organization in leadership ITE, that we need to really push down to our local members, down at our section level. I mean, simple things like the Myers-Briggs testing or the Strength Finders testing that is being done can easily be done off the web at a 15 to 30-minute extension of a section meeting that allows us to understand some of the background traits that we have. I mean, for Strength Finders fans out there, I'm a WOO, and for Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENTP. But the reality is when you know those things, and we did this as an organization, when we understand the strengths of people, it allows us to communicate better together, and it allows us to exhibit better leadership skills and listening skills as we go forward.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, well, I am interested. I've got a podcast series called Manager Tools. I like to listen to that as I'm driving around, and it's a casual conversation between two gentlemen about leadership and management on a lot of different aspects. But also, I was really kind of moved by the book, The Purple Cow, in terms of kind of an approach for you to see different things. And I think it applies really for even ITE. And the essence of that book is the author had taken his children to France and were driving at first in the countryside and very intrigued by all the cows on the hillside. But after a month or two of driving, the cows just kind of blended in to the hillside, and the kids weren't very excited about that anymore. The cows were still cows, but he makes a point that if there was a purple cow on the hillside, then the kids would be excited because it was something new and different. And so I think we find those types of things that make it intriguing that people talk about. And then the author talks about also kind of sneezers, those that are early adopters of something, and help spread the word, the message of what's different. So those are some things that I've enjoyed in my leadership training. Like Randy, I've done Strength Finders, and I'm a INTJ on the Myers-Briggs. So, but I've enjoyed all of those as I've gone through my leadership training through the years.
So let me follow up along the leadership theme because we have another question. And the question is, the IT president also serves, in essence, as an IT board chairman. And the question is, how will you facilitate board meetings in an effort to gain consensus? How will you work with your board that you'll be chairing and build consensus among that board and through them consensus out to the membership?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm starting that one off. So again, my leadership style is one of listening and also trying to engage. But at the same time, when you have a board of 13 members and then 3 executive committee, you can't talk about a topic forever. You need to have a chance for people to speak what they want to give their opinions on the topic, and then you then move forward. Try to come to a decision, either a decision there, or you're going to table it and come back to it later with some discussion and thought in between. And it's really that as chair in terms of kind of managing or moderating that discussion. The chair is an executive committee. You'll set the agenda for the board meetings and work with the other board members to set the strategic direction for the Institute. You certainly don't do it alone. And it's a shared responsibility with your other board of director members.
Randi, your approach to being a board chairman and reaching consensus?
Yeah, that's a challenging topic when you have a board as large as the ITE board. And one of the things that exists today, and I think there's some changes that we may want to contemplate together as a board. I mentioned earlier the organization of the different subgroups, committees, working groups, task force committees. There's the organization of that, even for a board member, can be confusing, and the assignments can be unclear. I have found, working with different boards from nonprofits to professional organizations in our business, that if you organize the roles of the board, and there's some key ones there in governance and audits and performance and compensation issues and nominating, that the board has to have assigned people to. But we have a lot of technical groups that are also assigned, and we need to be very clear about how that's organized and how it flows through the organizations to our councils and through to our members and sections, so that everybody can be participating at a broad level, not just at a small group. It's extremely important to set the agendas according to the doing that we're going to do, which means a lot of times, instead of just having discussion, get a motion on the floor and then have discussion, rather than have a discussion lead to a point where no motion ever gets made. I find that it's extremely important as a leader that we listen to our board members and have conversations. I expect to be having conversations with the board members and our section leadership and our district leadership on a routine basis, leading up to every meeting, and making sure that that's shared with all of our council, all of our section leadership, and all of our board members.
Okay. Let me shift a little bit now from leadership and a little bit to a more technical process question. How do you see ITE best achieving a balance between member desire for rigorous peer review guidance as contrasted to more nimble, quick response guidance? And I think this is a real issue as we are in an environment today where transportation is rapidly changing. We have been pushed to be more nimble and to be quicker in getting information out. And how does that contrast with the sort of the tried and true ITE approach of peer review or consensus-based building guidance? So, Randi, you're first.
You know, one thing we don't want to lose is that professional demographic democracy profile that we have in our decision making. It's who we are. It's really it's exciting to be involved with an organization that does that. But I can tell you, I've worked with the National Committee on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and they are also accused of moving very sluggardly, very slowly, and going forward. But there's some really key answers here that can make this really easy. One is we have emerging practice that comes out. Let's name the products emerging practice and identify them as such. They don't have to be best practice. They don't have to be handbooks. They don't have to be MUTCD manuals. They're emerging practice. And let's get on the ground with ideas and sharing right away. But let's make sure we thread that through our process, so that if we have a great idea, an emerging practice, it threads itself up to maybe the trip generation manual, maybe to the transportation engineering handbook, maybe to the MUTCD, so that the people with these great ideas can see how the logical process fares. Because one of the things that we're really good at in our industry is research. I mentioned this before and after studies. What's the benefit? What's the value? How does it perform? How does this benefit the traveling public in our industry in general? You usually don't have answers to that instantly, and we learn those. And if we're open to that learning and open to a process that allows us to emerge practice, learn, and then start setting more detailed rigor to our standards, we can accomplish the goals that you have of both being quick and nimble, as well as having rigorous standards. Thank you.
Jason, your thoughts on how we're more nimble but don't lose that sort of core value of ITE?
Right. Well, I guess I share a viewpoint with Randi, in that I believe that we can, through our councils, technical councils and committees who would be charged with working on these technical topics, to be able to create informational reports or successes about solutions that are being put out into practice. and documenting those and helping educate our members. But we can't lose sight that something that's a recommended practice or a standards-based is something that winds up being a very quick process. We want to make sure that those processes, because they're held to the higher standard, excuse the pun with that, but we want to make sure that we have enough debate and discussion on those and that they're really vetted. So it's not something that you can just be nimble pushing out some standard or recommended practice in 3 months. You want to make sure you have that dialogue, but we can certainly do things through the councils and committees in terms of preparing information, whether that's published information electronically through the website or webinars to talk about the successes of solutions that are put out in practice.
Thank you. Shift again a little bit to thinking about the next generation of professionals. And the question we got is, what do you think ITE can do to make the transportation industry attractive to the next generation of professionals with so much pull from tech, software, and other high-paying industries?
Okay. Well, I guess I'd say ITE it's sexy with technology. I mean, really, we're moving into that arena right now for students in K through 12 with the STEM education push, and as they get into college and they're choosing STEM careers. ITE and transportation is really something that is based on technology, automated connected vehicles. And that's where I guess I go back to ITE being that community of transportation professionals where we're not just traditional transportation engineers and planners, but we include others that are working on solutions and concepts that are affecting change in our transportation system. And I think for us to turn a blind eye to that and that happening really sets us at a disadvantage. So being more welcoming, including them in, to see that they can contribute to ITE, that we can develop and have technical programs that meet their needs as well, would set ITE on a path forward, and I believe would make it attractive for those prospective members.
Randi, your thoughts about how we can attract that next generation to IT and the transportation profession?
Well, maybe I've been too close to this profession, but right now I would say that our profession is about as great a place to be as you could possibly want. I mean, just think about, I grew up in a small rural logging town in Oregon, and, the future, was a logging job or a plywood job or a paper mill job. And I just chose to go to civil engineering. My family had grown up, my dad was a chemical engineer, my grandfather a mining engineer. I chose to go civil. But what I've learned over the 40 years is what greater profession is there than one that you can make a difference in what you do every single day, and broadcasting that and demonstrating that, whether it's signing and striping, improving safety, planning a community, improving mobility, dealing with ADA issues, helping others, serving others, finding ways to reach out to our communities. There's nothing more challenging, and I would think nothing more exciting as long as we share it in that same way. So putting out the passion that people have for this industry and the reason that they're in this industry is our number one asset going forward. Frankly, when you say, oh, we're in competition with Google and all these other people, I hear dollar signs, and I don't see most people getting in our industry because they're going to get rich quick. They have a great career ahead and a great income to be had in this industry, but they are passionate about what they want to do and serve their communities. And I think that, above all else, is what attracts people to our industry. And I think we've got great challenges ahead with the technology that we're utilizing in transportation to really bring in really stalwart folks coming forward.
Thank you. I thought this was an interesting question. The questioner wants to know what you feel is the most relevant IT initiative that you created or supported that has benefited the most ITE members. So what would you point to as an IT accomplishment, if you will, that you felt like you had a significant hand in? I think, Randi, it's your turn to go first.
Well, that one actually is pretty darn easy. This spans about 30 years of my career and service to ITE. Started in San Francisco with student scholarships that had not been done before, and we established those in my tenure as president with San Francisco section. evolved into Oregon. When I moved to Oregon, the Oregon section and the Traffic Bowl, the first Traffic Bowl in 1993, that engaged students in a networking opportunity. That evolved into the Western District leadership role through the early 2000s and the student initiatives that you see today, and many of them have worked their way all the way up to international in terms of engaging students. I've always believed that if our industry has a future, we need to be able to tap to our students and share the passion and be able to mentor students as they're evolving their thoughts about what their career is going to be, and matching them together with professionals. There's nothing greater in our industry that produces really high quality leaders than doing that. And we've seen it, and I've seen it over decades of time. And that's evolving to this day. The Student Leadership Conference was another issue that arose in the early, about 5 or 6 years ago, with a student member that thought, hey, we could do this. And Saki Mustafa, myself, and others in the district felt very strongly, let's do this, and have supported it since. And now you see student leadership summits across the United States, and networking and bringing students together in this industry and launching them on their careers.
Jason, an IT accomplishment that you would point to?
Yeah, I'll talk about two quickly. The first is my time on the international board. I was the membership committee chair, and it was within the membership committee that kind of initiated the review of the Constitution with our membership barriers that we had, and bringing those to the board, and that wound up being a catalyst for us to look at the other amendments that we passed just this last fall with our membership. But I believe that removing that barrier that we had in our Constitution to being a graduate of an engineering ABET accredited program, removing that barrier, I think it will have a big impact on ITE. Although I can't say the 15,000 membership campaign was because of that. I can look to what I would like to see ITE growing to 17,000 members, that with that barrier coming down, my personal experience, speaking to planners who said, I researched ITE, but you have to be an engineer. With that barrier down, I think we're gonna get more members. And the second thing is at the Texas District, when I was a younger member committee chair, we established a Thursday night social. In one respect, it was to get younger members there to talk and network, but then probably selfishly, the second aspect was they were there for the next morning for committee meetings and technical committees at the district to get them engaged and participating.
Thank you. We're getting close to the top of the hour, so I apologize if we haven't gotten to all the questions, but as we mentioned earlier, we're going to have a Facebook Live event a little bit later at 2 o'clock Eastern, and I'll make sure we bring in the questions that we haven't got to through that forum. But let me ask you a closing question for each of you. You've talked a lot about your ITE experience. You've talked a lot about some about your professional experience. We'd like to give our listeners a little perspective of you beyond your work and beyond ITE. So can you give us some insights on what you like to do, what you're focused on, what your interests are outside of transportation or ITE?
Sure. Well, I'm very family-centered. I've got 3 kids, really proud of them and what the kind of people that they're becoming. But beyond the family, one thing that I've really enjoyed is learning, studying, and then practicing Taekwondo. I've been asked, how did I get into it? The answer is, I'm walking down a store aisle and my kids who were in Taekwondo come up and they punch me or they kick me. So I had to do it for self-defense from my kids. But what I found in going and sharing that with them, with my son as he was working towards his 2nd and 3rd degree black belt, and I was going through color belts into my black belt, that time I got to spend with him one-on-one was really special. The things that I learned in Taekwondo with goal setting, perseverance, patience, self-control, all those things I find you apply every day at your job, every day if you're working with ITE or other volunteer organizations. And that's something that's really made a mark on me and strengthened me. So Taekwondo is probably the biggest thing outside of ITE that I like to participate in.
Thanks. Randy, your perspective on you, kind of beyond transportation and ITE?
That's evolved over time. Sports are definitely something that our family is engaged in over many decades, and we've been so fortunate enough to go to Super Bowls and bowl games, championship games, and such like that. Basketball games. Where it's at the Niner game where Dwight Clark caught the catch, and our family shared a lot over the years through that. It's been a great experience. We have family dinners at our house all the time. We're fortunate enough to have our family in the area, and so we get together virtually every week, particularly over salmon. Anytime come over to the house, salmon barbecues, particularly when the farmer's market's going, a great place to go on the weekends. Probably through the, growing up years with my children, coaching sports was an exciting time. And it was a great chance to have leadership skills and talk about listening skills and getting colds all the time from little kids. That was a great time in life. What we've done a lot more recently has been involved with nonprofit groups and different organizations. My wife's definitely involved in a lot of groups within the Portland area. And we just find that there's a lot of things to do outside our profession at the same time. One of the things that we just did where we were in San Francisco, and our son just had his birthday, and we went to the ballet, which I hadn't done in probably about 10 years. We saw Sleeping Beauty, and he actually works for the Ballet Conservatory. It's got his room and board paid, and in San Francisco, going to UC Berkeley. So one of the things I'm most proud of is both my kids went to my alma maters, and so my daughter to Oregon State, and now my son at graduate school at Berkeley, and that's been great fun for us. So.
Well, thank you both. So as I wrap up, first I want to thank you for your willingness to serve as candidates for ITE. It's a significant commitment of time and energy, even under our virtual campaign approach. So I don't want to minimize that at all of what you are putting into and what you have done in your professional careers and your volunteer careers with ITE. I think people got a flavor for that today through the answers to the questions and just the conversation we've had about how passionate you both are for ITE and how much you've done starting at the local level and moving all the way through the ranks of ITE. So I think, ITE is very fortunate to have two candidates that are as qualified as you are, and probably the only downside is that only one of you will get elected this year because you're both clearly well qualified to serve ITE in additional leadership capacity. I also want to thank all of the participants who joined us today, those that will listen to this as a podcast or in a recorded fashion, and those of you who took the time to ask a question either over the podcast or send it in advance. I think that enriched the conversation today by adding to the questions that we started with and exploring other areas or in more depth. So thanks to both of you, and thanks to everyone that participated, and certainly to the IT staff that facilitated this. Appreciate the time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.